Hello World Civilizations class, this is Mr. Lassiter once again, and today we're looking at Sparta, the warrior city-state, which was the warrior powerhouse of Greece, and who you may know from such films as 300, the story of King Leonidas and the defeat of the Persians. Well, we'll be talking about that a little bit later. Today we're going to get the basics of Sparta. So what are our goals today? First, to be able to describe life in the city-state of Sparta and to identify Spartan values. We'll also look at how the role of women is very different in Spartan culture than it was in Athenian culture, and I think you'll be surprised how. Of course, multi-day, thinking back to what you did last night and what we did in class today, comparing and contrasting Sparta with Athens. These two city-states were enemies at times, friends at times, but definitely developed very differently. In your digital notebook tonight, make sure you get the terms Peloponnesus, Helot, and Oligarchy. So let's get started with geography. Sparta was a city-state located on Peloponnesus, a large peninsula connected to mainland Greece by a very narrow isthmus. An isthmus, as you can see with my mouse, is a narrow piece of land connecting two larger pieces of land. That meant that this peninsula that Sparta was on was almost an island, but did have a narrow overland connection. Sparta did have access to a large area as they were able to conquer much of the Peloponnesus. Those people they conquered were the Helots, and they were forced into slavery. So let's talk about that early history. About 1000 BCE, Sparta is founded, and from 800 to about 600 BC, they start to develop that unique culture that Sparta is known for. They emphasize military experience. They put the welfare of the community above the needs of the individual. That means that if it hurt Sparta as a whole, then the individual would be either gotten rid of or done away with, or their rights might be violated in order for the benefit of the many. And this city-state was ruled by an oligarchy. We'll have that definition in one of the upcoming slides, but if you remember, that is a rule by the few, as opposed to monarchy, ruled by one, or democracy, ruled by many. In 700 BC, the Spartans conquered those Helots on the Peloponnesus. And these Helots were captured people who became slaves to the Spartans. Now the Spartans had a very large population to work the fields. Spartans could devote their lives to training for warfare, which they did. Part of that was because they had to be constantly on guard for slave rebellion. Slaves outnumbered Spartans about 3 to 1. So how did they train? Well, this is what you may know a lot of with Sparta. Infants were allowed only to live if they were healthy. In fact, if they were unhealthy, they were exposed on a hillside, and that meant just left out to fend for themselves, and they would often die overnight. But if those infants were kept and deemed healthy, they were destined for a lifetime of training. From up to the age 7, they would live a pretty normal childhood, but at age 7, they were taken from their mothers and brought to training camps. Basically, they would be living in barracks with other children training. And about from age 7 to 20, they trained daily for the military, and they did military exercises and fighting training and gymnastics, and it could be quite brutal. Children were toughened up. They were underfed, they were encouraged to steal food, and if they were caught, they were punished not because they stole, but because they did not steal well enough. They also were only given one tunic per year in some cases. That Spartan clothing was supposed to make them tougher. And tomorrow in class, we'll see a little bit more about the training regimen of these kids. It was quite brutal, but quite purposeful. If you survived training, at age 20 you technically became a peer. This meant that you could marry, you would still stay in the barracks for some time, but you would be considered more of a full member of society. And if you survived to age 30, when after all you probably would have seen some war, you became a citizen of Sparta. As far as politics, Sparta was an oligarchy ruled by a few. They did have 2 kings and a council of 28 elders who made big decisions. It did have a citizen assembly who could approve decisions and elect officials, but a very small few ruled the city-state of Sparta. And this was, designed to make sure the interests of the city-state was above all others. It was thought that the people, the few in charge, had the best interests of the city-state in mind. As far as values, of course, courage and skill in warfare were prized above all else in Sparta. Only 2 people could have names on tombstones. Those were people who died in battle and women who died in childbirth, because both were seen as courageous acts and contributing to success in warfare. Women, because they were giving birth to hopefully sons who would then fight for Sparta. Though in Sparta, compared to Athens, women had many more rights. And that was partially due to the fact that Sparta needed sons to fight in battle. Women could even own property in Sparta. They ran farms and shops, and they even trained in gymnastics, as you see in the image or the picture of the statue of a woman in athletic training to your right. Overall, though, Sparta was a very conservative society. They kept the same system of government and interaction for about 500 years, which is about twice as long as the United States has been around. So it's quite a long time. Sparta was not that interested in outside ideas and trade, and that kept them basically staying pretty much the same over that time. Remember that they had helots working farms on the Peloponnesus, which enabled them to be self-sufficient. So what about the costs and benefits of all this? Were there successes? Was it worth it with everything Spartans gave up? So let's look first at successes. Well, yes, they were the strongest and most powerful city-state by 500 BCE, much stronger than Athens. It's only later that Athens actually becomes the leading city-state. And they did have an unstoppable military force. They eventually will defeat Athens. We'll talk about that next week. But was it worth it? People sacrificed individual rights, had a very brutal upbringing. They practiced infanticide, which was leaving those infants on the hillside if they were not strong enough. Ultimately, this was a very rigorous life with constant warfare, a worry of slave uprisings. So is it worth all that to be the most powerful military force? Well, to the Spartans, the answer was yes. Keep in mind, for our goals today, you need to be able to describe life in the city-state of Sparta and those Spartan values, and explain the role of women in Spartan culture. And on your quiz tomorrow, you might see a question comparing and contrasting Sparta with Athens. Make sure to get this vocabulary in your digital notebook, and you have a wonderful night.